Hi, I'm Alan Day, CEO and founder of State of Flux, and welcome to The Power of Three, a video series where we interview leading chief procurement officers and executives about three things that have influenced their careers. From books to bosses, from music to movies, we explore the three things that have shaped their success. Join us as we learn from the best of the business here on The Power of Three. Welcome everyone. I'm Alan Day. Welcome to the latest version of The Power of Three. I'm utterly delighted to speak to Patrick McGee, who we've been speaking since about 2017. Finally get to see each other kind of live, which is nice. And we're turning the tables today rather than me being interviewed. I'm actually getting the opportunity to introduce Patrick. So welcome, Patrick. It's great to see you. Really looking forward to this.
Thank you so much. I'm a little nervous. This is so different from the rest of my book tour, but I think it'll be exciting
cool.
as well.
And I'll let you do all the plugs, but I have just finished it. I've got the copy you kindly sent me. Thoroughly loved it. Enjoyed it. I was reminiscing that our first call, and you were asking me about procurement and supply chain, and grilling me on why anyone would be interested in it. And I think you've now written the greatest procurement and supply chain book I've ever read. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's amazing.
So certainly it's an honor to have you on the show. I'd love to kind of get your take on if you just want to do a quick intro around yourself and three things that you think people would like to know, and three roles that you've had throughout the year. So over to you.
Yes, I focus on the roles. I wrote some of this out beforehand. But let me just give the quick background. So I'm Canadian. I was raised in Calgary, Alberta, a city that I think is actually pretty cool now, but I didn't care for it so much when I was a kid. It's like, considered Canada's Texas, but it's not. I don't know. It's just sort of a dull city. Nobody really lived downtown. It sort of had the makeup of like everyone should have a house with a little, garden outside and some grass or whatever. But then the effect of that was that everyone drove just miles and miles to get to work every day. So it's sort of like trying to create the best of like suburbia and a city in one. And I just sort of thought it failed in that respect. I like European cities, where you can walk or bike everywhere. Calgary is sort of the antithesis of that. But that being said, a lot of the cities sort of moved inside, downtown's more of a happening place these days with condos and stuff. So anyway, I don't know why I'm sort of shitting on my former city, but I didn't love it as a kid, but it's a cool place now. And I studied religion at university, and this will probably come through in some of the quotes. Not as a theology student, but as a religion student. So, writing, reading, thinking about sort of the big questions, but basically from the perspective of an atheist, perhaps inclined to a little bit of mysticism. But the origin there is that, like, my dad was an Anglican priest when I was a young kid. My parents had met at divinity school, and I'm the youngest of three brothers, and we all have a degree in religion. I might be the only one who doesn't have two degrees in religion. So the discussions around the dinner table are a lot of religious textbooks, right? Like one of my brothers studied Sanskrit for years and can sort of read in some detail. At least he's not fluent or anything, like something called the Vashista Yoga, which is it's like a Hindu god when he is a 16-year-old despondent about the world, and it's the lessons that he is given. So in a Western context, it would be like we found a text, buried in Egypt somewhere or something, of John the Baptist teaching Jesus when he's 15 years old, right? So just to consider how cool that is. It's the only religious text of its kind in the world, right, where God isn't teaching everything. He's the student. The problem with that is that you don't get any job offers upon graduating with an honors degree in religion. And so I fell into journalism in a sense by accident because, after university, I didn't have a whole lot to do. And so I basically moved back to this city that was just becoming kind of cool, Calgary. And I lived with my best friend, and I was able to get a job at a magazine. Anyway, so that's a little bit about my life. And then the magazine sort of, collapses, but I went to live in DC. The financial crisis takes place, but I was becoming an economics journalist. And then I become a bond reporter. And then the Wall Street Journal hires me to be a bond reporter. And the Financial Times hires me. And if I could do three things here, which is that Steve Jobs says you can only understand your life when you connect the dots looking backward. So before I get to my three roles, I can just mention that the three roles at the FT were 3 years in Hong Kong, really, maybe not studying China per se, but getting a sense of what Xi Jinping's first term was like, all a prelude to Hong Kong being taken over, essentially. 3 or 4 years in Germany, which is when you and I first interacted, because I was studying supply chains and understanding, the importance and fragility of supply chains, what makes the automotive sector work, that sort of thing. And then 4 years covering Apple out of California, right? And my book is essentially the three beats combined: China, supply chains, Apple. But 3 roles, if I'm just going to sort of mention those, I took a gap year after high school. And this was like a really maturing year for me. And I was a blueberry picker for a month, where I lived in a van in Chumbawamba, Australia, a place I don't think anyone has heard of. Living in a van because we really didn't have any money and we were trying to save as much as we could. It was basically eating blueberries every day. I mean, just mountains of blueberries as your like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just while you did this, just to sort of earn a living. But I only mention it just because obviously it wasn't, prestigious or like a great internship or anything like that. But having a year off where you're 18 years old and for the first time in life, your life isn't scheduled by somebody else. In other words, the education system, when you graduate grade 11, you don't think about whether you're going to grade 12. Of course you do. That's just the next thing. And I didn't want to start college thinking like, well, I have to select 5 courses because that's how many you have to choose or whatever. I took a whole gap year and I just had to decide what I was going to do each day. And it was a maturing year because it's sort of when I, realized I didn't want to just spend every day on the beach. That was the dream. I went to Australia and I ended up traveling around Southeast Asia, but I needed books to feed my mind. And so my mother's an English teacher and I had her send me a bunch of books, and that's where I really fell in love with reading. And, in retrospect, that's probably journalism as well.
I'm just still stuck on this, super impressed that you had blueberries every day after doing my stint as a strawberry picker after school.
Oh, wow, look at that. Commonality emerges. Strawberries would be tough, though. Blueberries, they're never bad. I love blueberries.
Strawberries are amazing, but after about 3 days of strawberries, you don't want to see another strawberry.
Honestly, I was still eating blueberries at the end of the month. It was totally fine. Throughout university, I was a waiter, so multiple restaurants. I really started in the restaurant industry, if you can call it that, at age 12 because I worked at Domino's Pizza.
Right. Yeah.
That was actually really influenced by my best friend back then and now. He's East Indian, and I think he had a sort of entrepreneurial sense in his bones that, he should be paying for his own frivolous teenager ways and not have his hardworking parents who had immigrated from India to take care of that stuff. And so he still wanted to be a teenager, but he wanted to buy it for himself. I don't know that he's never explicitly said this. This is just sort of what I intuited. And it made me feel a little bit like a spoiled white kid. And so I joined him at Domino's Pizza. And so we were working there 4 or 5 nights a week. And it's great to have that kind of experience. So that was from age 12. I mean, the first thing I did was read the book from Domino's that said you have to be age 14 to work here. And it's not that we were illegally selling ourselves, it's that Domino's didn't care. And Domino's is a franchise, right? So this is not some, excoriation of the national brand or anything, but some retail manager didn't care. And then the third thing, or I guess if I'm saying restaurant industry, so that built me up into being like at 16 when I wanted to be a busboy, I actually had 4 years of experience, again, kind of in restaurants. And then being a busboy led me to being a waiter. And that was a great experience. I mean, I remember like I would make $200 on a weekend working Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, just in tips. And the nature of working at a restaurant is like, it's tough for me now as a journalist to read full books sort of on the side, because I'm staring at a screen. I'm thinking, I'm writing, I'm reading all day. I'm keeping up with the news. When the day is over and I've got children, it is tough to read a full book or whatever. When you are exhausted from being a waiter, it's fine to read because it's a totally different part of your brain. And so I was really glad that I didn't have a glamorous internship or something. It was fantastic that I was just actually working with people. I associate being a waiter like with being a good actor, or at least an actor, maybe not a good one, but you're sort of playing a role for someone's evening. I don't know. I really enjoyed that.
My son is I'd love him to have a chat to your friend, but anyway, he has a job in quite a upmarket restaurant and absolutely loves it, just from the human interaction side of things and getting to meet influential people that come to the restaurant Yes, I'm sure you would have.
Yeah, and Canada's the sort of place where they really want you to introduce yourself as
Yeah.
the waiter. You know, you wouldn't do this in Austria or somewhere in Europe where the waiter's cold-shouldered and doesn't want to talk to you. In Canada, I was like having the time of my night or whatever. I'd be singing to my tables when I felt like it and stuff. It was really brought out a side of me that like otherwise doesn't exist because I'm sort of a hermit. Just likes doing work. And the third thing would just be my first journalism job. So it was at a Canadian magazine called The Western Standard. And I just remember like feeling underqualified. I had no background in journalism. I'd studied religion, literature at university. And the guy just sort of took a liking to me. And he said, you're going to learn more in 2 weeks of being a journalist than they would teach you in a year of journalism school.
Yeah.
And so it was just, learning by doing. And I made all kinds of mistakes, but I had a team around me. And it was just like a great learning up the curve thing. My wife, who has studied journalism, is sometimes appalled. Have you lost me? Is that what you said?
I got you back. I just lost you for a second. But,
okay. I was going to say my wife, who has studied journalism, is sometimes appalled at my, what am I trying to say? My ignorance about how certain things are supposed to work or what have you. But somehow
it works.
Escaped any responsibility.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Very good. And just moving on from that, and clearly, as I said, the book is fantastic. So I'm assuming one of the things you'd like to be known for is the book. But I'd love to get your take on what you would like to be known for.
As an author, you mean?
Just in general, over the course of your career, if I was...
Well, I'll tell you what I love about reception to the book. It's that I am not trying to convince you of an argument. I'm trying to demonstrate how the last 30 years played out for Apple. By and large, I'm not making biting remarks. I'm not in the narrative. I hate nonfiction books where the first thing the author does is introduce themselves. I introduced just Apple in crisis because Xi Jinping has just been elected and he's attacking Apple. I mean, it's meant to be gripping from the first page. There's no waffle. And then it maintains that pace, I think, for the entirety of the book. And yet, in the end, it is kind of damning, not of anyone who made particular decisions at Apple, but of, my God, you understand the predicament that they're in. But it's not damning because of flavorful adjectives I'm throwing at the company. It's just a fair presentation of how stuck they are and what that means, not just for Apple, but for the United States, maybe even for the West. So it's written in this kind of neutral tone. I mean, when Jon Stewart interviewed me, I was thrilled because he said, it's not a polemic. It's not hyperbole. You just sort of demonstrate that this is the case. And I mean, there's things that people can disagree with, or maybe they could say, I don't trust the sourcing on this or something. I mean, there are criticisms you could make of the book, but it is not a diatribe that you either are on board with or reject. So that's what I would love to be known for.
Excellent. And I'm not gonna let you get away with one. What are the other two that you'd like to be?
Oh, I've got 3 things. This wasn't in the show notes, Alan.
Yeah. It was hidden in there.
Well, I suppose the other thing I've been burrowing in my rabbit hole of the book, so I need to. So I guess the fairness, the tone is the first thing. The second one would be the pacing. So I did just briefly allude to that, but if you find yourself a little bit lost because it's a paragraph about engineering or procurement or something, fine, but just get through the paragraph because it's going to shift tone really quickly, or maybe not shift tone. It's going to shift scenes, right? So the book is not like a magazine piece that's then padded out so that it's book length. I've cut it down to make it as short as it is, right? There's a lot of material in there and it spans 30 years. So the pacing, how it spans continents and decades and introduces all these characters. And, I've described the book as a Trojan horse before because I'm trying to sell you on the sex appeal of Apple products. But actually what you'll learn is things like supply chains, procurement negotiations, things that sounds maybe a little bit dull. And yet you're learning them through these fascinating characters. So I'm never having to say, okay, now we're going to learn about X, right? It's just that I'm introducing these characters and telling these scenes where you will be picking up these things without me expressly saying, this is why I'm telling you that.
And you're absolutely right. I think I'll call it the neutral tone works all the way through. And your interview, I think it was with Jon Stewart, where you talked, and I know we talked about this earlier, talked about them not being a villain. It was really It was really just how this panned out. When I looked at it from a procurement lens, I was thinking, well, certainly old school procurement would be one of the villains that I saw. But I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know the difference between old school and new school procurement. You're going to have to school me on that. I think what you're referring to is that, there's a character named Tony Blevins who largely led procurement for 20 years at Apple. And yeah, I mean, he's this fascinating character where he sort of, I don't know how many books Tony Blevins reads, and maybe he reads a lot, but that's not his smarts. His smarts is street smarts. And he grows up in a really poor area of North Carolina, and he earns a scholarship, to I think the State University, and then later studies at MIT. He's at IBM for 12 years, where he overlaps with Tim Cook and Jeff Williams, the most senior people in operations, are the people who pluck him up. But when he's a teenager, he works for his father's used car lot, and he and his brother have a bet who can sell the shittiest car for the most money every month. And he really kind of feels the injustice of a bad price for himself in his bones. And it makes it into a game. And so some of this old school stuff is he would gather, Apple people around him, let's say 12 people in a room, and would give them all the exact same amount of money and then send them off to a market to buy ties. And whoever came back with the most ties with that set amount of money was the winner. And then he would so he's sort of doing what I'm doing, right? In terms of teaching you something without actually saying what the lesson is. So these people are learning the value of $1, right? And so I know, like, this isn't in the book, but someone would leave the meeting and they'd get in a taxi to go to the market, and Tony Blevins would just be shaking his head like, what an amateur. You take the bus to the market. You don't waste your precious dollars on the taxi. Like, this person's fired kind of thing, like, do you not understand the lesson? Yeah. So there's lots of old school things like that. And I mean, if there's a movie made of this book, I mean, I'm going to have to personally oversee who is playing that character, because Blevins is a real character.
Yes. Yeah, and it certainly came out. So I've got one more thing that I want you to come up with that you'd like to be known for throughout your career. And it doesn't have to be about the book, but
yeah.
Sorry, you'll see that.
Well, I'm trying to think. So let me see if I can sort of snake my way back into this. So my favorite thing at the FT was writing for the Big Read desk. So if you have the actual physical newspaper, there is one story every day. It's like, page 6 or something, that takes up an entire page. And so I realized that was sort of my length, right? 2,000, maybe 2,300 words. And I'm not just saying that as a boast. Like, I'm also saying it's like breaking news isn't really my thing. I struggle to keep up with the quick-witted Brits who, when something would happen in the world, they would immediately have a sense of it. They would even have a sense of humor about it. And I'm this slow Canadian who's still trying to digest the implications. And in part because I try to see multiple angles of it, and in part just because I have this slow processor where I really digest the meaning of something, the consequence of something over time. And so in some respects, it's a real deficit, right? And in some respects, it's an asset, because I guess my understanding from talking to other journalists is they don't do that. Malcolm Gladwell actually has this great podcast, although I read it by a lawyer friend the other day and she hated it. But it's about him taking the LSATs. And what he's furious about is that when you take the LSATs, they are basically giving you more information than you could naturally comprehend in the allotted time. Because what they're really quizzing you on isn't your smarts, but your quickness. And he, like me, I guess, is a slow Canadian. Right? He's also Canadian. And so he doesn't like it, because he says, look, I'm good at certain sections of the LSATs, but they don't allow me to then move on and use the extra time I've gained into the next section where I'm bad. And then he interviews someone like a Supreme Court clerk and asks how slowly the person reads. And they're like, oh, so slowly. I've got multiple colors of pens and a highlighter. And, it's not like reading a Harry Potter novel. And he interviews the world champion of chess, but also the world champion of slow chess. And, effectively, these are different sports. And so he's furious that the LSATs are sort of not allowing someone like him, and obviously as the listener, someone like me, make it in the world of law, because from the get-go, you're not going to do well on the LSATs. And yet some of the best people that are lawyers, as he demonstrates throughout the episode, are these slow processor, digesting the news, digesting the impact slowly. Anyway, that was a really cathartic thing. So I'm just trying to wrap this up with, what am I... like, understanding your skill set in whatever field is really important in your career. And I remember writing about the German auto industry, and I would sometimes go to the Frankfurt Auto Show with our very quick-witted, like very fast journalist Peter Campbell, and he could just write multiple stories at a time, and I was still thinking about the one story that I was going to write that week. Yeah. So I guess if I have something that I want to be known for, it is like the fruits of that slow, careful, patient writing, where the arguments all sort of flow together, and maybe there's a bow on top because it's all been tied up so nicely.
Well, and I think I mean, linking that back to the book, just how considered your research is and how it all flows together clearly is an example of that as well. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, it is the proudest thing in my life, and it hits all three of those notes for sure.
So let's move on. Because we've been talking about your book, but what are three books that have influenced you throughout your career?
So I really struggled with this, and I'm a voracious reader. But for starters, I don't necessarily finish a lot of books. I start a lot of books. I mean, my household is just full of books, much to my wife's chagrin sometimes, because there's just new books arriving, and she knows that I haven't finished the ones that I'm currently reading. So let's see. It was called The Basic Writings of Sigmund Freud. That was my real introduction to Freud. So it's actually 4 or 5 books in one. It's got the interpretation of dreams in there. It's got the wit and its relation to the unconscious in there, and a couple others. And I got really influenced by Freud at university. And I would still, to some extent, I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but I would really describe myself as a Freudian. But really what I'm meaning by that is he really emphasizes just how irrational we are. And I love that. And when I'm reading behavioral economics, to me, they're just like scratching the surface of just how animalistic we are. Yeah. They're trying to do experiments that point out that under certain scenarios, we use system 2 instead of system 1, or maybe I'm getting that backwards. This is Daniel Kahneman. And I think Freud was sort of 100 years ahead and more profoundly than the behavioral economists working today. Yeah. I don't know. Have you read much Freud? Is this much of a conversation starter?
I have actually. And one of my degrees was in decision sciences, so which I absolutely loved. It was a combination of the maths behind people looking at decisions, but then the behavioral science side of it as well. So yeah, loved that.
Yeah, I mean, Freud is relevant to basically like every field short of particle physics. Yeah. I think his influence is absolutely profound. And as a religion major who was studying it from an atheist perspective, he was, I don't want to say like, he was a hero. I certainly didn't worship him. He's not like a God substitute. But his writing, if anything, his writing is too good. Like, in other words, that can be a problem, right? Someone like Neil Ferguson sometimes I think is too good of a speaker, right? Because he's got this great Scottish accent and his ability to sort of convey how much he's read to you. But maybe his argument actually isn't good, but like it's just so, you can be so swayed by the writing style in the case of Freud or the presentation style in the case of Neil Ferguson.
I found it, and I suppose in the procurement, you're constantly looking to read what the other person's doing, where they're heading. So for me, it certainly has shaped my career on that side as well. So yeah. So
okay,
Freud
so Freud.
Is one. Yeah.
Most influential book I've read in the last couple of years is called The Wealth and Poverty of Nations by David Landis. He passed away 12 or 13 years ago. The book's probably 25 years old. I think it's published in 2000. In its own way, it's a book about technology transfer, which is what my book is about. And I was reading it while I was doing the writing. It was very instrumental. And actually, the epigraph to the book is from David Landis. It's not from the book, but it's from an academic paper of his. So he was an economic historian. Yeah. And the nature of the book is he's really trying to figure out why did the industrial happen? He's trying to figure out when did the industrial... I hope you're editing this. He was trying to figure out why did the Industrial Revolution happen, when it happened, where it happened, and then how are its lessons diffused around the world? Why do the lessons go to some places but not others? And so it's not quite a world history, but there are entire chapters on the Islamic world, on Japan, on China, and on Europe. And of course, this is all after Britain. And it's just absolutely fascinating. And I guess I never thought about it, but he just reveals to you just how consequential the Industrial Revolution was for the entire world. So it's a fantastic book full of just really interesting stories. He's often quite funny, all sorts of ingenious inventions, but like he's got the cultural understanding of a good anthropologist. I mean, that's what makes it so good.
It's interesting because I for our last, I think you may recall we do books on supplier relationship management. Nowhere near the caliber of what you do, but the last book was around. We called it return on relationship, and I spoke to quite a few futurists that looked at, where are we going, from the industrial to what, what are the next few things, and they're all saying we're moving from the digital age to the reputation relationship age, which is quite interesting.
Okay.
So, I think.
Well, this has a good Chinese connection because of the importance of guangxi, the social relations or political relations.
Absolutely, and also I know your daughter's a bit young, but my teenagers with their social media, and they've got all the information they need in their hand. But actually, what they have to manage is their reputation and their relationships. So I can see that happening already. So taking those lessons and applying it to the next shift, I think would be quite interesting about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, so certainly that was fascinating to see that the changes, and I was trying to apply it to, well, how does that affect procurement when you're looking at kind of reputation relationship? And at the moment, most procurement people don't consider the reputation and relationship.
That's interesting. I mean, the journalist equivalent is trust, right? I mean, trust is your currency because, I will have sources ask like you say it's off record, but how do I know? Yeah. And it's a fair question, but it's, I don't know how to convey to someone other than if I'm using your off record comments and citing you without you, I mean, that's just the end of me as a journalist. I mean, my interests are aligned with yours in that respect. And, I will take that just so seriously, even if someone has recommended somebody else, unless they've told that person, I won't let it be known to that person, even when I can't get in touch with the original person. And it would be much easier if I could. Trust just matters so much. And I think it's more or less what you're saying, because when I say trust, really what I'm meaning is reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and sorry, we're slightly off piece, but third book.
That's okay. Third book. I just deleted my original one and put this in for the Histories by Herodotus. Yeah. And specifically, if anyone's interested in this, you want to get the edition called The Landmark Herodotus, because, if people don't know, this is probably around 4th century BCE Greece. And Herodotus is basically just trying to write the history of why East and West are fighting. Basically, the Hellenic Empire and the Persian Empire, why they've been at war. And he kind of approaches it the way a journalist would. And so I think the more correct translation is the Inquiries, because he is just going around talking to people, and he really does a lot of travel. So he's a Greek speaker, but he's actually on the part of the other side of the Mediterranean. I think I'm getting this right. So he's somewhere in Turkey, in terms of where he's born and whatnot. But he goes around Egypt and a whole bunch of other places to sort of document cultural thinking and beliefs. And he tells all these sort of myths and stuff. So, my point is, if I were to recommend to an 18-year-old or something, for a summer read, this ancient Greek book, you'd think I don't want to get bogged down in this ancient Greek stuff, But he is fascinating from the first pages. I mean, immediately you're in the realm of myth and storytelling and, empires and kings and prophecies and all kinds of stuff. But I think he's a really diligent journalist. And I say that because he often gets certain things wrong, and we know that they're wrong, but he tells you why he thinks something. So, of course, he doesn't know things like the Earth wraps around the sun. And so that leads him to the something false. But because he's telling you, he's showing you his work, as a teacher would say, I think it's brilliant. And I got all excited by him and then thought I would really love Thucydides. And I didn't care for Thucydides at all. And it turns out they hated each other and their styles are vastly different. So anyway, if someone's read Thucydides, who's more popular, and thought, well, I don't care for ancient Greek stuff, give Herodotus a try.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to change it up a bit and look at movies now. And I'm assuming...
I struggled with this too. My favorite movie is called Magnolia. Do you happen to know it?
I don't.
The worst way to describe it would be to call it a Tom Cruise film.
Right.
He is in the film, and he does a phenomenal job. But it's a cast of characters that includes Julianne Moore, Philip Seymour Hoffman, William H. Macy, and several others. And it's P.T. Anderson is the director, who's famous for a number of films. And it's at least 25 years old. I mean, this has got to be late 90s. And it's a film where you have maybe the lives of 8 different characters. It's probably 3, maybe 3.5 hours long. It's beautifully done. The cinematography is amazing. But it's really nice how these 8 characters' lives in some way, and I think this is where Magnolia comes from, the shape of the flower, some ways intersect. Maybe they only intersect thematically. Maybe you find out that someone is the daughter of the other character or what have you. But it's just beautifully written. It beautifully comes together. And just talking about it makes me want to see it. I haven't seen it for more than 10 years, but I've probably seen it 4 times, which maybe isn't that long or that many until you realize just how long a film it is.
I'll put it on the watch list. Yeah.
All right. Fan favorite. Number 2 is Back to the Future. I love this film. I will watch anything to do with time travel or time loops. And I recently got a chance to see with my little daughter Back to the Future, the musical, downtown San Francisco. There were 16 songs. None of them are good, but it was still phenomenal. And they really bring a sort of cinematic feel to the stage. And it was just fantastic. But it's the sort of film where I could watch it anytime it comes on TV.
And no link between the Canadian.
Oh, yeah, that probably helps. I mean, it's funny, like when you have a favorite film and it's from the 80s, like you sort of think like, oh, wouldn't it be great if it got redone today? But of course, you vastly worry that they would ruin it. And I can't imagine someone rivaling the role that Michael J. Fox plays. I mean, he's just like the perfect, cool
I have
Canadian
to say,
teenager.
I'm a huge fan. I showed my kids when they were probably just a bit older than yours, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and they
that's funny.
Absolutely loved it. So yeah.
I saw like a TikTok video the other day that was arguing that Ferris Bueller's Day, why can't I speak? That the movie makes more sense if the premise is that he is in a time loop and he has lived this day thousands of times. And it sounded a little bit crazy, but it kind of made sense. I thought the argument was quite good because he's so comfortable and confident about various things that happen. And so the argument was, well, he could only be like that if he knows how things are going to shape out.
You'll
have to go find the video.
Yeah, it's one of your time loops. And the third movie?
I just wanted to be current. So Oppenheimer.
Okay. Yeah.
Oppenheimer is, I just think, a total masterpiece. And it's one of those films, it came out just as I went on book leave. And so I immediately wanted to race home and go buy the book. And it's, of course, a 900-page book, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. And I didn't allow myself to buy it until the manuscript was submitted. So as soon as the manuscript was submitted, I ordered it. And then, I only read 250 pages before edits came in. And, then I get new interest. And so I've never gone back to it. This is all in the last year. But I would love to read that book. I would probably read another biography of Oppenheimer because Ray Monk, who wrote a favorite book of mine on Wittgenstein, the German philosopher, who's going to come back in a minute when I give my favorite quotes, he wrote a biography of Oppenheimer. So not the one that that the movie's based on. But yeah, Oppenheimer's a significant enough figure that I think I could read 2 biographies of the same length.
Okay, well, that leads us nicely into bosses and 3 bosses that you've had throughout your career.
So I hope I'm not cheating. I'm using 2 professors to start.
Well, yeah,
okay, so I sort of minored in world literature at University of Toronto. And I was not much of a student in high school. It's not that I was trying and failing. I just wasn't really trying. I had no real passion for anything. This is why the maturing year off was really helpful because, I spent some time in Indonesia and I just had basic questions like, if Muslims and Hindus are fighting so much in India over places like Kashmir, but Bali was half Hindu, half Muslim, like, why aren't they fighting here? Like, it's not like a great question, but like, I didn't know the answer and I was kind of intrigued. And it just sort of awoken me. What am I trying to say? Awakened me to understanding different cultures and wanting to know more about them. So although my degree is in religion, you could really say it's in anthropology. And I got to study a lot of different cultures, including like you would say non-literate tribes. Back in the day, you'd say pre-literate tribes, but that's because there was a sort of social Darwinist flavor mixed into the literature that academia since turned against for obvious reasons, perhaps. Where Where was I going with this? So I unofficially minored in literature, and I had this favorite professor named Sam Selecki. He really opened my eyes to Marcel Proust and James Joyce. Also some thinkers I didn't care for, D.H. Lawrence. He loved him, but I didn't like Lawrence. But he was a really tough professor in terms of like the marking. But his class was always a great joy because he would just tell stories, and they weren't necessarily about the books we were reading. And so one of my favorite quotes that I'll have in a second actually just comes from him, and he attributed it to Hegel. And it turns out Google doesn't know this quote, so I don't think it is Hegel. It's apocryphal Hegel. But I really liked him, and I guess I was so impressed by his smarts that I would really spend a lot of time on my work, hoping to sort of be in his league of this isn't just acceptable, but he's learning from my interpretation of James Joyce or something. And so I remember the first time I submitted a 2 or 3 page assignment, we get our papers back at the end of the class, and he said, "You've all disappointed me so much. I've only handed out 1 A in this class. Everybody else is around a C range. Everyone needs to step up their game." And it goes on this diatribe for a couple minutes. And I'm thinking, like, I'm out of my league. Why am I in this world literature class when I'm a religion major? Like, maybe I should just drop out or whatever. And then I get my paper and I look at it and I've got an A+. Yeah. And that sort of set the ground for wanting to continue to get that grade for the next 2 years that I did work with him. And it culminated in my thesis about James Joyce's Ulysses, and it got like an A++ in it, and it was submitted for the dean for the Dean's Prize, and it did not win. We didn't even hear back, but nevertheless, that was just great. Okay, contrast that to my other favorite professor, an anthropologist named Gillian Gillison. I saw both of these teachers a few years ago, so they're still around. She was an expert in a place in Papua New Guinea, okay, like a real anthropologist, and she spoke the Gimi language. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of people there are in the Gimi tribe, but not many, and she can speak their language and had written a book about it. And she was a real Freudian. She's the person who introduced me to Freud. And she was the opposite of Sam Selecki in terms of, handing out really good grades if you did well. Her highest praise would just be to write good on your paper. Yeah. And I remember when I got an A grade for a sort of private seminar I took with her, because I studied with her for 3 years, she gave me an A for the paper and an A for the course and said, "I hope you know nobody would ever publish this shit." And I was sort of taken aback. And she goes, "Look, you fulfilled the requirements of the course and the requirements of the paper, but you need to know it's a whole different thing to get something published. What you say in 10 pages, a better Redditor could say in 5, and it would be better written." And I just loved that, because later I knew some students at Columbia, because I lived on their campus. And I remember someone getting an A on a paper that I had marked just days earlier. And I thought it was kind of pathetic, and it had all sorts of problems and words that the writer didn't actually know and things like that. But then she got an A, and she thought, "I'm going to submit this to the New Republic," And I just thought, you need Gillian Gillison to say, "You fulfill the requirements of my course, but nobody's publishing this shit."
Yeah, I like that. And your third one?
My third one, I would actually just say the editor of my book, Rick Horgan at Simon & Schuster. He describes himself as a big ideas editor. And as soon as I saw that ahead of a meeting, I met with 5 different publishers in a matter of days. I thought, that's perfect, because I'm not wanting to write a narrow corporate history. I'm wanting to write, in a sense, like a global history that happens to be through the lens of Apple, but it's going to touch on multiple continents. And he was just great. I mean, and going back to the whole trust thing, he just trusted that I would take the year off and actually write the book. There was no hand-holding. I just took the year off with very little contact with him and just got it done. And then when it came to the editing, he's the sort of editor that you don't always get, which is that he points to the problems, but he doesn't fix them. It's up to me to fix them. And if you're a writer, you've got some ego involved. You've got a perfectionist tendency involved. You want to be in charge of your writing. You don't want to have to submit a newspaper article where some sentences are written by someone else, but you didn't want to put up a fight. It's not that hill that you want to die on. And so he would never write a sentence for me. He would say, "This intro doesn't work," right? He would say, "This conclusion, it's not really a cliffhanger. It doesn't make me want to keep reading. Get rid of this page entirely." But it was always that rather than him fixing it. And I just appreciated the hell out of that.
Yeah. It sounds like almost a combination of the two earlier bosses.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't put that together. Yeah, maybe that's the case.
Yeah. I'll keep moving because you've hinted at a number of these quotes, so I'm quite keen to hear what quotes you.
This is where I'm going to lose the audience. Okay, so I guess I'll say the quote first. So, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. That's Ludwig Wittgenstein. Do you know Wittgenstein by chance?
No.
Wittgenstein doesn't have like a popular resonance, but he is like the philosopher's philosopher. Like he's arguably the most important philosopher of the 20th century, but he doesn't have that much mainstream appeal. And in his life, I mean, I argue he's lived the most fascinating life of the 20th century. I mean, the book by Ray Monk that I mentioned, The Duty of Genius, absolutely fascinating. So he is born to like the equivalent of the Rockefellers in Vienna. I don't know if he's born in Vienna, but he grows up in Vienna. And he's Jewish, but his family is Protestant. They've sort of had to hide their Judaism, as it were. And he's a bit of a mystic in his later writings, which I enjoy. And I'll come back to that. But essentially, he's a total prodigy and a total genius. I mean, he literally goes to elementary school with Hitler. And there's an argument that Hitler's anti-Semitism may very well be based on his complete envy of Wittgenstein. Okay, when Wittgenstein is around 17 years old or so, he goes to Bertrand Russell, the key, mathematician, philosopher at Cambridge. And Bertrand Russell immediately recognizes Wittgenstein as a total genius. And they're studying together when World War I breaks out. And so he lives in Austria. He's on the other side of the war. So he goes to the trenches of the war. And in the trenches, he writes the only book that he will ever write in his entire life. Its shortened name is the Tractatus. It's about 70 pages. In theory, you could read it in an hour, as I've done. You won't understand any of it. And the final sentence is, whereof we cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. And I don't pretend to understand Wittgenstein. He's really difficult to understand. And what's so funny is that Wittgenstein is so popular that he has a following between early Wittgensteinians and latter Wittgensteinians, because the biggest critic of early Wittgenstein is later Wittgenstein. And so philosophers have found themselves in two camps of because his philosophies are so different and they emerge at different points in his life. But the fact that he writes this philosophical groundbreaking book that becomes required reading at both Oxford and Cambridge within 10 years of it being published, the fact that he wrote it while he's in the trenches of World War I just think is absolutely phenomenal. And then if I'm just sort of doing a full quote here, because it's so funny, or the full circle here, what happens is he thinks he solved the problems of philosophy in the 70-page pamphlet. Okay, and I'll have to leave to someone reading Wikipedia what the hell that means. But he's obviously fascinating. And then he goes off to be a school teacher. I mean, he's not going to be a philosopher. There's nothing else to philosophize about. So he goes to be a school teacher in rural Austria for 6 years. It doesn't go well. And so he goes back to Bertrand Russell and he says, can I teach philosophy? I'm interested I have some new questions I'd like to solve. And they want to hire him at Cambridge. But of course, he doesn't even have a bachelor's degree, I don't think, let alone a master's, let alone a PhD. And yet his book is required reading among all philosophy undergraduates. So they accept the Tractatus as his PhD dissertation. And so they have to go through the motions of him defending his dissertation. And they have 3 of the top philosophers of the early 20th century as his dissertation advisors, as it were. And one of them, I don't remember the other 2. One of them is A.J. Ayer, who will be known to people in philosophy. And it ends with Wittgenstein patting A.J. Ayer on the back saying, "It's okay, you'll never understand." So this is just the first half of Wittgenstein's fascinating life. And if anyone's interested, then go read The Duty of Genius. Or even better, there's a book called Wittgenstein's Poker, as in a trident that you poke a fire with. And that's a dual biography of Wittgenstein and Karl Popper, written by some BBC journalists, and it is fantastic. I'll try to shorten my next answer.
I'm loving it. So,
all right. So this is apocryphal Hegel. So I don't know who said this other than my professor. And the quote is, "The world does not care about you. If anything, it is hostile."
Okay. Yeah.
So, not a very inspirational quote, but I guess I kind of like the pull your bootstraps mentality of it, that you shouldn't be relying on anything.
Yeah.
It's all up to you. The world's not there to help you. And if anything, it's going to put up roadblocks. I just like the self-sufficiency of that quote.
I think based on that and your lecturer, you might just like the challenge of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the last one, this is from Benjamin Lapetute. He is a Chilean I was almost going to say novelist, which is a bit of a Freudian slip. He writes nonfiction, but through the lens of a novelist, you might say, or he uses the tools of a novelist. So, for instance, one of his books is called The Maniac. It is largely a biography of John von Neumann, who's a Dutch mathematician and the godfather of artificial intelligence. And yet, as factual as the book tries to be on every page, he writes the book through the lens of his mistress, his wife, his colleague, another colleague, etc. And so he's obviously making something up in order to write those scenes and to write in that voice. But he's such a master of the genre that it's just absolutely fascinating. So 2 books have been translated from the Spanish into English by Benjamin Lapetute, and they're among my 10 favorite books ever. And his book, this is not from his, this is from an interview he gave that's on YouTube. And I wanted to give it because it maybe won't mean a lot to most people, but if you're writing something, it might, because it's about the creation, the act of writing. And I wrote my book nocturnally, and this just really spoke to me. Most people who create art of any kind know that there is a couple of pages where you weren't really there. I'm not sure what's there instead of you, but I do know you write the entire book for those couple of pages.
Interesting. Yeah.
You can see my penchant for mysticism, perhaps, in that quote.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting kind of thought to, and I suppose I just think of even our work and yeah, I'm trying to think of I talk to my team about you've got to practice well so that when you're in the throes of it, it just becomes naturally. And I take from that quote that's kind of really what he's talking about is once you're in the game.
Yeah, I think the crude way to be it's like when you're in the zone, when you're Michael Jordan and you're hitting shot after shot and you can't explain it. It's just how you feel. I think that's probably the more popular way of putting it.
It's kind of I suppose it's that zone piece, isn't it? It's I like it. It's good. It's good. So switching it up, music.
So I'm a real music aficionado, but probably also a real music snob. I hate top 40 music. I'll put it on for my kids, but man, oh man, do I not care for popular songs.
They haven't been bitten by the frozen bug yet.
Yeah, no, they have. Of course they have, and that's what I have to listen to all the time. All the time. But it drives me nuts. So I've got 3 songs here. I don't know that any listeners really know any of them. The first one is maybe somewhat popular. So it's called Black Milk by Massive Attack.
Yeah.
Massive Attack are like the pioneers of trip hop in the 1990s. By the way, my wife's looking over at me. She has no idea what interview I'm doing. She's like, this is obviously different from all the interviews you're doing. It's not about the book. So Massive Attack is a pioneer of trip hop in 1990s Bristol, UK. Portishead would be the other big band. They sort of combine like slowed down hip hop beats with like ethereal singing and stuff. And Black Milk is just a great introduction to trip hop.
Very good.
More recently, Come Down to Us by Burial. I love Burial. This is another UK artist. He's sort of like an estranged DJ. I don't think we know anything about this guy. And the way he puts music together, I just think is awesome. It's kind of dark and brooding, and it's like club music. But I've heard him talk about the way he puts music together, or what he's trying to put into his music. And I mean, again, most listeners are probably going to put on a few minutes of Burial and be like, I don't know what the hell Patrick's talking about. But people who like Burial love Burial, and I just love his work. Come Down to Us is a 13-minute song. Right. He stretches all kinds of genres. He uses all sorts of weird, intricate, original beats. He takes things from video games. He takes people speaking and puts them all together. Just fantastic, but not on the radio ever. The last song is Mother Protect by Nikki and the Dove. They're from somewhere in Scandinavia. I want to say Sweden. It might be Finland. Nikki and the Dove have this one album called Instinct, where I think every song is a banger. It's from like 15 years ago. I got to see Nikki and the Dove. And this is the great thing about liking bands that don't have a big following. I was like one of maybe 20 to 30 people in a record shop where they basically performed half their album right in front of us. It was just totally amazing. I just totally love their work. So you're going to have to pause the narrative to like throw in some clips of these songs or give people a chance.
We normally will put the links for your books and songs on the posting.
Yeah, right.
So we'll try and find.
Let's send it
We'll
to the
try
top
and find
40.
Nicky and the Dove.
Yeah, Nika. Sorry, Niki,
Okay.
I should say.
Nicky and the Dove. Done. That'll get the marketing team. Either fans or some interesting comments. We'll look forward to that one. So to wrap it up, I normally sort of look at 3 things that you've done well, 3 things you'd like to improve, and then 3 pieces of advice. So
oh God, these weren't on the.
They were hidden in the small print.
You're just hitting me with these. Okay, let's try. I don't know that I'll have 3 for each, but go in succession.
3
What's the
things
first one?
Done well. It's actually a little technique we use for all our team after any piece of projects or meeting or anything. We always ask them to do 3 things that they've done well and 3 things that they could improve.
You know, my wife jokes that I have none of the skills in my day-to-day life that are necessary for a journalist to be a good writer. In other words, I don't listen particularly well, but I do in my journalism. And I'm oblivious of my surroundings in a way that a journalist probably shouldn't be, you know, like details should matter. So I'm bringing that up in part because these are sort of like learned on the job necessary skills when you're focusing on. So I think my ability to listen is one. My ability to connect the dots, that's probably my best trait as a journalist, right? Hearing different things, whether they're different anecdotes or things in different decades, but finding how they resonate with each other and then putting them all together, fitting it all together, right? Like your story is like some big puzzle piece and you're just sort of gathering the puzzle pieces and then it's going to be really coherent if you put it all together.
And you,
I learned a lot of that, I would say, from James Joyce. I mentioned him earlier. I mean, Ulysses is just this fantastic novel where not a syllable of a word is out of place. He just has such control and mastery over everything he writes. And it's not even something to try to aspire to, but you can at least like admire it.
Well, certainly your book, it's phenomenal how you've connected the dots all the way through, and you can, you know, it's easy to see in your mind's eye how it all flows, which for quite a complex area.
Well, I'll tell you something that I think is funny is that I did 8 months of interviews before I wrote down a word. And I remember, I mean, I was writing notes, I should say, but I didn't like have chapter 1 or anything. And my biggest sort of black swan risk, as it were, was like getting a head injury because the book was in my head and it wasn't really on the computer, right? It was nobody just looking at my computer would be able to figure out how to write the book because it wasn't in any, it's like organized chaos at best. More chaos. And so I was always worried that like, well, I can't go biking because if I somehow hit my head, I'd just lose the book. And then, you know, what am I going to tell my publisher?
So the third thing, just that you do well?
What were so other things I've done well? Honestly, protected my sources. That's really important. I can't emphasize that enough. If someone wants to be on record, amazing. If they don't want to be on record, they cannot look like they're on record.
Okay, very cool. 3 things you'd improve?
Is it in journalism or as a person, or does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
I mean, I'll say one, which is just that I'm a runner. And it sure is tough as I'm older to improve my running times. You know, like I just did, for instance, 120-day running streak. And yet I did not lose weight during that time. And I didn't get quicker during that time. Whereas 15 years ago, I could have run a marathon, you know, quickly after that amount of training. So I don't know, somehow if I could become a faster, more diligent, quicker runner, that would be ideal.
Very good. I broke my ankle in August last year playing football or soccer. And running... My run times have plummeted.
Yeah,
and weight has gone the other way.
It's the most concrete. I mean, running is the only real thing I measure. You know, like just because I've got an Apple Watch or whatever, or I run a marathon. I know the time. I know the time that I used to be able to get, and I don't get it anymore. And it's like the most impactful impact of aging. You know, that's unseen, but that I just feel in my bones that I'm slow now. So that's frustrating. You know, the other one is languages. I wish I had a better ability to learn and retain and speak other languages. And I don't know if it's just a matter of I don't have the right gene pool for it or whatever, the right DNA, or if I just didn't study it at a young enough age. But I spent countless hours and wads of cash trying to learn German. And my German was just never really that great. I mean, I would get by just saying like, ich habe kein Sprachgefühl, which means I don't have a feeling for languages. And so the irony of saying that in a foreign language would always sort of like, win a point or two or whatever at the table. And then we could go back to English. But like, my God, if I could just be some sort of like master of languages and converse in multiple languages. I mean, I love other culture. I love anthropology so much. But if you don't speak multiple languages, you're not going to be a good anthropologist. So, to some extent, that's why I couldn't pursue it as a field.
Yeah, I get it. And the last one, as I said, I'm not going to let you get away with two. So,
I think maybe the third would just be focus. I wish I could focus better, and I don't know if it's because Google, Facebook, and X have all made me stupid, or just my inability to retain or to stare at something. But like, I do not find it easy to get a book and just read 100 pages like I used to do at university all the time. I mean, I will come across a quote that I want to tweet. I will check my phone multiple times. I'll just get distracted by so many things. I legit don't know that I could read War and Peace. It's not a book I've read, or even The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbon. I've always wanted to read that. I know that it would take a long time. And I just don't know that I have the attention span for it. If I could really focus, without relying on like pills or something, that would be a great achievement. The irony is that the way you do it is by learning. I mean, actually, if I struggled through Gibbon, went to a coffee shop every day without my phone or whatever, I mean, that would be the way to re-get it. And so that is something that I'm working on. But yeah, no, I say it in part just because I'm sure everybody has that feeling these days that
massively
our ability to do something long form in a focused way is really, really tough. Writing I can do, but reading, I find it difficult to sustain.
You're making me feel better about my half-finished books. And
yeah, well, God, half is probably quite a good thing. I have a tendency of buying books, reading the first chapter or two, and then I'm never consciously moving on. I just get distracted into something else, and then like the Oppenheimer biography, I love the book. I'd like to go back to it, but it's like probably 30th on my list right now.
Yeah. And final thing is 3 pieces of advice for listeners that you might have.
This is like the graduation speech
absolutely.
Question. What do you say?
For when you're back in
I mean, I don't know if this is answering the question or not. One sort of thing I hate is when people say, be yourself, especially to the younger generation, because I think it's one thing to be yourself when you're surrounded by, I don't know, the right people, the right lessons or whatever. But like, I'd much prefer young people look up to certain people, read the biographies of their favorite thinkers or engineers or artists and learn from them rather than thinking the right decisions or answers are already inside you. I think I'd have to give that more thought, but I think I'm very much against that idea. I think we need to be learning more rather than believing the answers are somehow inside of us already.
Yeah, I love.
Do you know what I mean? It worries me that if you know the amount of time people are spending on TikTok, I don't want people that spend 4 hours a day on TikTok to be themselves. I want them to search for something better and then emulate that.
I completely agree. And I've noticed that people that give the be yourself advice tend to be ones that have already been successful. And
right.
kind of work their backside off not being themselves to then tell everyone else to be themselves. I think. Yeah.
But by the way, this is how I did literary criticism as a university student, which is I would read a book, not feel like I had anything particularly profound to say, so that I would go reading what other people have said about the book and then find myself just in staunch disagreement. And that's how I'd find my argument. So I'm realizing and answering your question here, like the other, like I'm thinking of advice that's usually given and then how much I hate it. So the second one would be when someone says, live every day like it's its last. Like, that's terrible advice. I mean, maybe I'm just taking it too literally, but no, like live each day like it's building into something else. So like if you're focused on something that's great today, hopefully that pans out decades from now or whatever. A reason to go on a run today is because if you cumulatively go on lots of runs, you will extend your lifespan or whatever. If I knew I was going to be dead tomorrow, why would I waste my time running? That doesn't make any sense. So I'm probably just taking that too literally, but I hate the idea that we're supposed to live every day like it's its last. I think that's nonsense.
I agree.
Now I'm going to think of another bit of advice that I hate. What do people say so I can be in stark disagreement with them? I'll tell you one that I like from Joseph Campbell. I quoted it to someone recently. So do you know Joseph Campbell, the mythologist? No. Unlike Wittgenstein, he does have some popular resonance. So in the late 80s, a few years before he died, he did a PBS series with Bill Moyers called The Power of Myth. As you can imagine, if you remember Who's in My Family, everyone in the family likes that 6-part PBS series. It really is quite good. And one of his famous quotes, it'd be great if this was like a forgotten quote. I think it's a little bit cliche at this point. It's been, it's the subject of cliched artworks and, college posters and stuff, but it's, follow your bliss and doors that you didn't even know existed will begin to open for you. And I do quite like that. I like when people make decisions in their life where they don't know where it's going to go, but they're making a little bit of a leap because it feels right and they're going to sort of deal with the consequences later or what have you. But if you really love something, going after your passion, I think is going to, can I give a silly example? When I took a Buddhism course at university, I had really no respect for the professor, and I got a 97 in the course. And I thought that was ridiculous. Unless I full on attained enlightenment, I don't think anyone should be getting a 97. I just think that's an absurd grade to give somebody. 90 is maybe the max you should be getting. And my big assignment was I'd created a board game, because this is what you're supposed to do, rather than written some, great, essay on one of the schools of Buddhism or something. So I just didn't really have much respect for this professor. Well, I had another friend. So I was done with the course. I wasn't going to take another course with this professor. I had another friend, also got a 97. Okay. And of course she was going to take another course with the professor the next year. And she also had little respect for the professor, but she was like, I could really use another 90 plus grade on my resume. Yeah. And I just thought, that's a terrible, I understand it. Yeah. And I think she was in a tougher field, psychology, where the grades really mattered and she wanted to go into grad school. So it's not like I didn't understand where it was coming from, but to take a course where you didn't think you were actually going to get much out of it, but the sort of superficial grade was going to help you, I just thought that was the total wrong mentality, the wrong thing to take out of life, let alone that particular course.
Yes. But the interesting thing there is the you're talking about following your passion, basically, which is almost countered.
Well, she's not following her passion. She was just following the grade. That's my point.
That's right. But
I would rather take a course I'm really interested in where I'm going to learn, even if it means I'm getting a C.
Which is following your passion.
Yeah.
But, yes. So I completely agree. But is that part of the counter to what you were talking about from your first point?
Yeah, I'm giving an example of someone not doing that. Those I find easier to do. I guess I'm pointing it out to the degree that which I don't like. This is why I hate pop music. It's all so manufactured and cliche. And so little phrases that we're all supposed to follow for our lives, I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, we're all very different, I think, in many respects. And there are not just lessons that we're all supposed to follow. When I say instead of be yourself, I'm saying find out who you admire. I'm not dictating who it is that you admire, right? That's kind of up to you. There's this thing I love about existentialism. Jean-Paul Sartre he's got a great essay called What is Existentialism? And his comparison is a human versus a chair. And he said, when you look at a chair, you know that in order to have its form and shape, it was in someone's mind, an engineer, an artist, and then they created the chair. Okay. And he says, human life is the opposite. Existence precedes essence is his definition of existentialism. So for the chair, the essence, the idea precedes its existence. In human life, our whole goal is that we all of a sudden exist. We're thrown into the world without knowing why. And the goal of our lives is basically to figure out what our essence is. What's our reason for being? That I think is far more profound than be yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. Awesome. Thank you. This is good. This has got you thinking, well, got me thinking, definitely. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Patrick. And I don't know whether you want to do another plug for the book for the readers, but we'll make sure that there's plenty of links available for them to spend their.
No, look, I know you're a procurement, chief executive, and if you're saying it's the best book written about procurement ever, what more of a plug do I need? That's fantastic.
It is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I certainly wouldn't get to the end of a normal procurement book.